Good morning. Happy Sabbath. You know, usually when I get up in front, I try to make you laugh because I try to take away from some of the hurt and the pain that I feel. Today, though, it's not about me. Today, it's all about my friend, God. Today, it's about how he took a poor boy from Mississippi to his kingdom. Today, it's about how he put me with a woman, and I didn't understand what it meant by to be equally yoked until about 6 months ago. About 6 months ago, I had a traumatic thing that happened to me, that I had a sore on my left foot that got infected. Now, I've had other operations. I've had open heart surgery. I've had surgery on my eyes. I went blind. I've had surgery on my shoulder. I've had all types of broken bones and been scalded with hot water. I've been in wars where I thought I was going to die. But then I had to think that most of that was to prepare me for what happened to me 6 months ago. My wife got me up, and just so that you get a good thing with this, this was Christmas Day or Christmas night of last year. She woke me up, took me to the hospital at 4:30 in the morning. I don't remember any of it because I was septic. 4:30, we got to the hospital, and she said by 7:30, I was in the operating room. And they said there was nothing that they could do to keep. At first they started with my toes, and then they went through part of my leg. But they couldn't save it. And they had to take me off the operating room, off the operating table, because I had lost so much blood that they had to take me off the operating table to save my life. And then a few days later, they took the rest of the leg. And I was on so much medicine, they gave me so much harsh medicine that it damaged my kidneys, that I had to go on dialysis. And they told me, you'll probably be on dialysis the rest of your life. So when I woke up, they finally told me these things, but I was still loopy in the head, and I couldn't function. I couldn't understand anything that they were talking about. But she was there to take care of everything for me. I had no way of knowing that these things were going on. So I started dialysis, and I was never so stressed out in all of my life, because I dealt with the blindness. I dealt with the open heart surgery. But now, losing a limb is like, for me, as a man, that felt like I was just defeated. But I guess that was God's way of telling me that you need to surrender more and not worry about that. So when I finally got around to everything, and I, I was going through this dialysis, they sent me down to Mishawaka to this rehab place, and I got down there, and my spirit was just, I'm away from all my family. I'm away from everyone that I knew. And they put me in this room, and there's nothing in there. And I can't get up and go anywhere. I can't get out of the bed. I can't do anything. So all I could do late at night is pray. And I prayed and I prayed. And I just felt that spirit come over me, and it lifted my heart. And my wife came up there and we prayed together. And I'm just going to be honest with you. My family, not just my immediate family, but my church family. Every time I turned around, somebody else from the church was coming through the door. And it lifted my spirits. And I kept saying to myself, just maybe God he's not finished with me yet. He has something for me. But Satan will always be whispering in your ear, oh, no. So I got to praying, and one day the dialysis people came in, and they were like, flipping through the charts, and they were like, your levels are dropping. And I was like, what are you talking about? They said, your levels, you're getting lower and lower. And so I said, could this be? Could the creator of the world? Because everybody was telling me, you're going to have to get a kidney transplant. You're going to have to do this. You're going to have to. You'll never get off of dialysis. But we prayed. And once we prayed, the doctor said, I don't understand this. How could your levels be? It's like your kidneys are firing back up again. How could this be happening? And so I smiled and I said, I know how. So we continued to pray. And I did all the things that they wanted me to do. And I couldn't stay away from my house or God's house any longer. I had to get out of that place to get back into this place. Because this place is where he wants us to be. And I want to thank everybody that came through that lifted my spirits. And I mean, it was a lot of them. A lot of people came through. And I was, couldn't shave or anything. And I went up to the VA to see my primary doctor up there, and she said, last time I seen you, you were a hot mess. And I said, what? She said, you were a hot mess. This and that. And I said, you know what, doctor? And I stood up in front of her. And she looked, and I heard her gasp. And I said, what's wrong? She said, you're standing. I said, yes, stomp. So I've had a lot of things that go on with me, but here's one more thing. when I was hallucinating real bad, and I was out of it. And the only thing I knew I was bad, and Pastor Bryce came up there, and John Baxter, good old John Baxter, yeah. Anyway, I was up there and I was hurting real bad. And the only thing I wanted to do, I figured I was gone. So I told my wife, hey, just take me home so that I could die at home. Because I didn't want to die in the hospital. I want to at least die in good surroundings, what I figured were good surroundings. And I wanted to go home and be in my bed and be comfortable in my bed and die. And I heard my wife sniffling. And she said, no. And it kind of shook me. I was like, what? No. I said, well, that must mean I'm supposed to get better. And that's what I did. I got better, and I praise God. So everywhere I go now, they say, for a one-legged blind man, you sure are in good spirits. I said, because the God of heaven is in my heart. He's in my heart. Okay, I just got one story. This is a good one. Okay? It was a few years ago, because the 4th of July is coming up. So a few years ago, I was at the VA, and I could see shadows, not real good, but they were having a group. And they asked me to come to the group. So I said, yeah. So at this time, I had a blind cane and, an old man walking cane. So I went up there and I went through the seminar or whatever they want to call it, and it was on family. Now for me, it didn't mean that much because it was mostly about the men in your family. So I've never really known my father. And here's the thing. Through my life, there's only 2 things that I ever wanted my father to say to me. That he loved me and that he was proud of me. But he never did, never has. So I went through the seminar, and then when it was over, it was already past the time for me to catch the bus back home. So I was going to catch the bus to the downtown train station in Battle Creek to catch that train to come to Niles and have my wife come and pick me up in Niles. So here I am walking with 2 canes, and I go get on the elevator and I come downstairs and I touch my little watch, and it told me the time, and it said I had 15 minutes. So I'm trying to get change out my pocket so that I can make sure I have enough change. And something told me, you got time. Why don't you just sit right here on this bench and, count the change? So I sat down, and when I sat down, a man from across from me said, young man, you wielding both those canes pretty good. And I said, yeah, I've been doing it for a while, so, And he said, are you from around here? I said, no. I said, I live down about an hour or so away from here in Stevensville. And he said, oh, that's where you're from, Stevensville? I said, well, I grew up in Benton Harbor, but I'm actually from Mississippi. I said, a little town in Mississippi. And he said, Mississippi, huh? I said, yeah, Mississippi. He said, what town? I said, Clarksdale, Mississippi. He said, oh. I said, wow, you know something about Clarksdale? He said, yeah, I'm from Friars Point, town right next to Clarksdale. And I said, that's where my father is from, Friars Point. And he said, well, why are you up here? I said, well, because my mother's birthday is this coming up weekend, and I don't want to get stuck up here for her birthday. I want to be back home for her birthday. And he said, oh, what about your father? I said, my mother told me his birthday is like 2 weeks after hers. And, he was like, yeah, my birthday is like 2 weeks after the 4th. So I'm sitting up there thinking. And I said, so where are you from? He said, I told you I'm from Friars Point and, this and that. And so in Battle Creek at the VA, they got a big window where the ladies sit back. When you go up there, the nurses are back there. And then they got a sitting area. So he and I are talking. And I said, so what are you doing? And he said, well, I came up here because I was in the service. I said, yeah, my father, I think he was in the service too. And so we're talking back and forth. And I'm really, my mind is really going. And I said, well, and he said, don't worry about it. I'm white, you black, so I'm not you. I know you were thinking. And I said, yeah. He said, not that couldn't happen. He said, because I have mixed kids. So, and I was like, oh, yeah, okay. So I clicked my watch again, and I had 5 minutes. So I stood up, and I said, all right, Pops, I got to go. And I heard him start whimpering. And earlier he had told me that he had a son like my same age. And when he started whimpering, I was like, what's wrong? He was like, well, my son passed away. And before he passed away, we had a falling out, and I never got a chance to patch things up with him. And he said, do you mind if I give you a hug and I was like, sure. And so he hugged me, and he kissed me on my cheek, and he said, I love you, and I'm proud of you. You tell me that God don't know what he's doing. By this time, the ladies behind the desk, behind the bubble, they slinging snot, crying. And I'm like, what? I said, he's crying on my shoulder, and he pulled out his old man handkerchief, he wiping, the kind like Pastor Bowman has. And I had to get that one out. But anyway, and I was so hurt. And now most people would think that story was really for that older gentleman. But I think that was for me, because he said the very same thing that I had always said I wanted my father to say to me. And I never did get his name. And when I got on the bus, I was like, man, I didn't get that dude's name. So the next time I came back up there, and the lady that was in there, I was like, hey, you remember the other day when I was in here? And she was like, move on, sir, move on. I was like, you can't move on, sir, move on. And later on, I came back through. I said, what was wrong that you couldn't tell me that? She said, we couldn't give out the information. And she said, I was trying to make you wait because he was back there in the back right again. And she said, I was going to get you to go around the back, and I would let you in and talk to him. But you I had to go, so that was it. Anyway, I just want to thank you guys once again because you guys really came through for me. And once again, God, you know, people say these things to me all the time. He has something for you. But I never thought about it until these last 6 months where I can, even though I'm blind, I can clearly see that he's had his hand on me. Thank you.